face. So, before I go on to do to talk about electrical systems of the body, something that I was told by my mother and her unseen forces was that not only are we mucking ourselves about, but that by marrying people with electrical systems that are very diverse, it's like, you know, if we meet somebody and we just find them really easy to talk to and we just have this rapport with them, we say we're on the same wavelength. So this is really the thing. However, apparently we have a sister planet who we haven't discovered yet. And they have found that travel in space is very dangerous and boring. And they've done their best with robots and things and found that robots are not really very good or reliable. And so they've discovered, whether they have known as much as I'm talking about here, and about how everything starts with pondweed, and then, you know, these little entities go on and on and on, and then in a computerized way their entities are fused together to go forward to make a bigger creature, and this goes on and on ad nauseum until you get to be a baboon, and then I think it goes on with the entities of 4 different apes. It goes on to be the first human being, and this is how we all go on. So it's one mustn't think of it as being politically correct. So because there's this relationship between all creatures and humanity, it is possible to fuse the sex cells of animals and human beings, which is an abomination against creation.
Now, I'm going to have to talk on this bit. This is exactly what Alex Jones has been on talking about. There's a major 5-hour thing with Alex Jones talking about. It's just been out on the internet. We're talking March 2019 right now. And as you know, he was taken off the air, and he's a bit annoyed about that. But exactly what you're talking about the fusing of animals because of their similarities, pig humans, cow humans, and also I've heard that the animals will use their internal organs in terms of a way of sending energies to attack humans because they're annoyed with them. Cows.
Well, I don't know about that, but...
Well, sorry, that's off the point, but
yeah.
What is it? I'm just saying that what you're being told, what is happening with this information in 1972, 3, 8, whatever.
This was... I think probably the first thing that was brought to our attention was Whitley Strieber's book, Communion. Yeah. And he was abducted by these little creatures, and he found himself screaming. Anyway, I've gone off the point. I'll go back to Whitley Strieber in a minute. So what happens, I can remember at school, and you're talking about in the late 60s, there was a scientist who mixed pig ovum with human sperm. An abomination. But it started to grow in a test tube, and I think it got to 8 weeks. And because it was in the papers, there was an outcry. But I suspect
they only probably told you that. That's what they told you in the public. But
well,
who knows? A hell of a lot further.
Who knows?
We know that from James Casbourne.
Yeah,
and all that sort of
I think things are going on all over the place, which is
all up Porton down.
Wow. I have to say, my father went there when he was in the Navy, and he had signed the Official Secrets Act, which I think is a way of just getting people not to say but he came back terribly upset. I don't know what he saw because he couldn't tell us. However, so what our sister planet have done, not in the basic way that I'm saying, but they have mixed human, animal, insect, plant, to produce these little creatures that we've all seen, you know, these little ET type creatures. And in fact, I've actually seen on the television one little creature that remained alive for a while. I think it was in America. I felt immensely sorry for it, actually. However, these little creatures, the whole idea, or the whole reason that we have to go through many, many different types of incarnation as animals, as different forms of human being, and progress forward. The whole idea is designed to give us a very sort of deep humanity. And we think on many different structures. So say, for instance, I meet Miles for the first time, and I'm not only do I have an instinctive feeling that I like this man, you know, he's quite good fun, but I've, to my certain knowledge, never met him before in this lifetime. But I know things about him. So, you know, you can tell whether, sometimes you can be talking to somebody about the weather or something and you're thinking, this person's very nervous. They look depressed. Or, so you know things about them. Or you could be talking to someone and you think, oh, I don't like this person at all. I really feel they're quite evil. Or you feel that somebody's very good. You know, we have multidimensional ways of thinking. So these creatures that have been created, and they're not brought to full term in another animal or something, because then they would just go back to being an animal. I've written about it in my own book, actually. When a woman is bringing a child to full term within her, it is her humanity and her intelligence which actually, so even a woman who is having a baby, who is a complete surrogate, so she thinks that she's been given the right hormones and she's had a fertilized embryo which is of no relationship to her at all, placed in her body, and that child starts to grow within her. She will give that child humanity in some way, and that child will have some of her brain patterns. So this is what the other planet have been doing for a very long time, and using these little creatures as to perform basic tasks, you know, to experiment in different parts of the universe, to experiment on us, I believe, and do all manner of things, which is where the Whitley Strieber thing came in, where Whitley Strieber wrote this book, where he, I would advise anybody to go and get it, actually, I think it's probably still in print, Communion, where he has a property out in New York State somewhere, and he and his family used to go there at weekends, and he suddenly found himself awake one morning. He would walk past the television and it would change channels. He was extremely disturbed emotionally. Something had happened under his fingernail where he had a sort of wound there. Something had been up his backside. There also the back of his nose was very painful. And it was only when he went to for some psychiatric help, and the psychiatrist hypnotized him, that he remembered waking up and seeing this little child that he thought it was a child coming into his bedroom, and then with a little sort of like a wand, this creature took him up and out of his room and into this spaceship. And it all sounds very preposterous, but this did happen. And he found himself in this very alien environment, and there was a sort of smell which he said was just totally inhuman. And there were some sort of discarded overalls around the place, and he found himself sitting in this chair with this creature that didn't speak to him, but spoke to him through telepathy, so he could read its thoughts. And this creature was saying, what can we do to stop you screaming? And it's so frightened, and it was an awful experience. He was unaware until that moment that he was actually screaming. And then he said to this creature, which he felt was female, let me smell you. And this creature held its hand up to his nose, and he smelt it, and he said it was like nothing you've ever smelled before. Anyway, you know, a lot of people just have discounted all these accounts for different people who say that they have been abducted. But unfortunately, this is not true at all. It definitely has happened. But the other planet, who are more advanced than us, when you think of the advances that we have made in the last 10 years, but they are stratospherically more advanced than us. And our sister planet could get to us, apparently, once every 3 years during a period of 3 months. And unless they go and come in that time, they're stuck here. So there are many of them who are living here under the sea or underground or in the heavens, and they have been experimenting on us. Anyway, one of the things that they're experimenting on us for is to find out why we, who obviously are the same as them and are their sister planet, and I think they have also interfered in our genealogy, which is one of the things that these people say, which is somewhat of a problem for our humanity. Why we, who are like them and have some of their genes, why we can still have children and they can't. Because so many of the entities, once you create life, it goes into the computer, that is humanity. And it should be a very careful sort of progression of entities. And that's what goes to make a human being. But if you mess about and you mix sperm and egg and genes, or whatever you like to call it, from plant, animal, human being, over a long period of time, and you mix it so it's all out of sequence to produce this creature which can do little things, and you remove its genitalia and you don't allow it to breed, well, it probably can't anyway, you think to yourself, well, that's okay. It's not going to cause any problem, but it does. Its little entity goes back into the computer, that is life, and at some point it's going to be reincarnated. At the moment, my sources have said that a lot of these creatures have gone to be some Chinese, which is very unfair on the Chinese. However, the thing about it is that they don't think as we think. They don't think in 3D as we do, or many Ds. And it also means that if you've been doing it over centuries and centuries and centuries, you find that almost every human being in your planet has some genealogy that has been used to create these creatures. So the women of their planet are producing monstrous children or not able to have children at all, which is why so many of us have been abducted. However, there are some programs on television I've seen on Sky and things where they are saying that they are now, some of them are here now, and they are doing it to us. And this is another way that could destroy us. So our scientists also must know that any revolting, genetically modified mixing of races, mixing of humanity with animal is an abomination. And anybody who does it would only hopefully bring down the worst kind of approbation on themselves. But unfortunately, they bring it down on the rest of us also. So I just hope that, this knowledge becomes public, and that any kind of messing about with genealogy will stop. Not only that, we're mixing our different cows up. People wonder why, a cow that's bought from a market, which comes from another herd and another species altogether, why it won't sort of mate or can't have a calf with their bull. Because cows also, they belong to herds. I mean, some farmer friends of mine were saying how surprised they were that their very docile Charolais bull or something, they bought a mixed breed heifer from the market and their bull attacked it. Well, of course he did. It was alien to him. But with artificial insemination, we're messing about with our cows, which is why we're getting this, mad cow disease. We're mucking about with our sheep. We're mucking about with our dogs. Everybody's got a something poo or a something, whatever they are. Really it is a terrible thing to do. And, anybody who gets one of these fluffy things, and yes, they're very nice, and, they're always told, you've got to have them castrated, you mustn't try and create them, because a lot of the mix of these races of dogs actually become quite unwell, and they get problems with the cruciate ligament, they say, which is really actually where the kidney meridian comes from, and the kidney stores your genealogy. So say, for instance, I were to give somebody my kidney, they would inherit any health problems that I would be cooking up, or as a result, and vice versa. We just don't know enough about these things. So this is where these creatures have come from, and they do exist, and they, I think, are completely, anybody who's come across them have said that they are completely unable to, they do not feel emotion. We feel emotion, even our dogs, will feel some sort of emotion. They can appreciate it in human beings. But these creatures don't, because they have not had previous lives. They are just a mixture of genes produced to create a small job, and they can probably do something appalling. So we should be on our guard, and any of our scientists who think that they're playing God and messing about with our genealogy should have this severest penalties against themselves. So anyway, that's the end of that bit.
Well, a friend of mine, just on that subject, the reason why in vitro fertilization was created was to do what you've just been talking about. And they then released it into the civilian domain for infertile couples, and the infertile couples are of course infertile in the first place because of what you're talking about.
Well, I've also got another thing in my own book about in vitro fertilization. And basically, although we all want to have a baby, the thing is, if nature says to you, don't have a baby, and it doesn't work, then don't have a baby, because usually one or other of those parents has something wrong, or they're not really two people who are happy together anyway, who their electrical frequencies are not right. And sometimes a woman can actually make a man not produce very much sperm because she's not really right for him. And, women have sex with all sorts of different men, and their fallopian tubes are all blocked. And basically, a lot of us have some health problem. I mean, I have had health problems which have been created by the genealogy that's gone into my family. I mean, I think that, possibly my grandmother on my father's side, I think one of her grandparents was black. She comes from Somerset, and Bristol was a big slaving port and very close to where she was brought up. And I'm sure my black ancestor was lovely. But some black people have blood groups that are G's and F's and H's. We think that the only blood groups are A, B, O and A, B. They're not. There are now more than 50 different blood groups. And people have electrical frequencies that are different. And we are meant to live different lengths of time. So you're now getting a very mixed racial group of people. The other thing too, I mean, we look at the Vikings as tall, blonde, beautiful people of the past, and much tattooed, I believe. But they also have one of the things which is very common is they have rhesus negative blood, and rhesus negative blood really doesn't mix well with rhesus positive blood, which a lot of us are. They tend to have very low blood pressure, very low heart rate. That's normal and healthy for them. But when they have a child with somebody who has a higher blood pressure and a higher heart rate, it means that the person who is the result of that if they survive to have a healthy life, they very often have some some body systems that should work on a low heart rate and some on a high. My younger sister is rhesus negative. I am not rhesus negative, I'm rhesus positive, but I have the low heart rate and the low blood pressure. And I've also got an extra lumbar vertebra, which is another thing. So we're all different races and we should stick together because it is meaning terrible health problems for people. Also, if you, I inherited a condition called fibroids, which are the biggest killers of black women. And they can appear in girls in their late teens, early 20s. Mine didn't really get going until I was probably in my late 30s, early 40s, but they were a horrible business. And I think probably from the dawn of time, when I was a small child, the chunk of genealogy that I had from my black ancestor was not good at all. It also meant that for my grandmother, who was one of 9, 2 died in the First World War, but they all had heart problems, and only 2 of them lived to be old, and the others died in their 50s with the old African heart. So, and were very dark looking. My grandmother had grey eyes and blonde hair, but could sit next to a light bulb and get a tan. So this is the sort of thing that you're starting to find. So things like rheumatoid arthritis, heart trouble, diabetes, all manner of digestive problems that people are getting. We now spend more money on constipation and diarrhea pills than we do on cancers. And cancers are another thing. When you have a body that is struggling with its genealogy, and it will develop a growth to prop up some other thing, some other body system that's failing, and you have some people's body systems are so bad, you're never going to cure any of them. Anyway, I've finished on that, and I'm going to talk about the electrical systems of the body. Do you want to go on with this same thing, or close that off? Okay, finish that.